baby, it's coming, the pain!
Okay, breathe. I'm right here.
I'll call for help right now. I can't walk.
Please calm down. We've just reached the hospital.
There's only a little distance left. Are you okay? Is the pain getting worse? The baby feels out of control. Oh my God!
A lonely, homeless pregnant woman went into labor at a coffee shop, then Marcus appeared. Hook full. Story words 1,800, and the end a stranger named Marcus. The contractions had started 3 blocks away, but Sarah kept walking. What else could she do? There was nowhere to go. The shelter on Birchwood had turned her away 2 nights ago full. They said, always full, and the November cold had driven her inside the first warm place she could find. A coffee shop. Maple Bean, the sign read, with little illustrated leaves curling around the letters like they were trying to look friendly. She pushed through the door, and the warmth hit her like a wall. The smell of espresso and cinnamon. The soft murmur of people with somewhere to be, someone to call, something to go home to. Sarah had none of those things. She found a chair near the window and lowered herself into it carefully, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other gripping the back of the seat. 8 months and 3 weeks. That's what the free clinic had told her 6 weeks ago. The last time she'd managed to get inside one. The midwife, a tired woman with kind eyes, had told her to rest, to stay warm, to eat regularly. Sarah had laughed on the inside, not unkindly, just because the advice had seemed so far away from her actual life, like instructions written for someone else. She set her backpack on the floor between her feet. Everything she owned was in that bag. A change of clothes, a toothbrush, a photograph of her mother taken sometime in the 80s, a small stuffed rabbit shed found in a donation bin and kept because it felt wrong to leave something that's soft and small behind. The contraction came without warning. Not the dull ache she'd grown used to, the constant low-grade tightening that her body had been doing for weeks. This was something different. Something that started at the base of her spine and rolled forward like a wave, stealing the breath from her lungs and bending her double in the chair. She grabbed the edge of the table. The coffee cups rattled. A woman at the next table looked up. Their eyes met for a moment, and Sarah watched the woman's expression move through surprise, discomfort, and then a careful blankness as she looked back down at her phone. Sarah understood. She didn't blame her. She'd learned a long time ago that visible need made people afraid. Not cruel, usually, just afraid. The contraction passed. She breathed through it, slow and deliberate, the way she'd read about in a pamphlet she'd once found in a waiting room. In through the nose, out through the mouth. You are doing fine. You are doing fine. She was not entirely sure she was doing fine. A barista young, wearing a dark apron, her hair pulled up, appeared at the edge of her vision. Sarah braced herself for the question she'd heard in a dozen establishments over the past 4 months. Can I help you? Are you waiting for someone? You need to order something to sit here. But the girl just looked at her, worry pulling at the corners of her mouth, and said, Are you okay? Yes, Sarah said automatically. I'm fine. I'm sorry. You don't have to be sorry. The girl glanced toward the counter, then back. Do you want some water? Or, I can call someone. No, Sarah said too quickly. No, please don't call anyone. The girl hesitated. Then she went and got water anyway and set it on the table without another word, which Sarah found unexpectedly moving. The second contraction came 7 minutes after the first. She knew what that meant. She'd read enough. She'd spent hours in library branches, warm, quiet places where no one asked too many questions, reading everything she could find about labor and delivery, trying to prepare for something that felt impossibly large and impossibly close. 7 minutes apart meant things were moving. 5 minutes meant she needed to be somewhere with medical equipment and trained hands and clean surfaces. She did not know how to get to that place from here. She pressed her hand to her stomach and felt the baby shift, a slow, rolling movement that always made her breath catch, even now, even in the worst moments. I know, she thought. I know. I'm trying. She had been trying for 8 months. She had tried when the baby's father left. She had tried when her landlord changed the locks and left her belongings in trash bags in the hallway. She had tried when her sister stopped answering calls, when the temp agency lost her file, when the social services office closed for renovation for 6 weeks, right when she needed it most. She had tried and tried and tried, and she was so tired of trying, but there was still this small, insistent life that kicked and turned and needed her to keep going. So she kept going. She was reaching for her water when she heard the chair scrape across the floor. A man sat down across from her, not beside her, across, which meant he intended to stay. He was somewhere in his late 30s wearing a green canvas jacket and jeans, with the kind of face that looked like it had been lived in hard, but honestly. He had brown eyes that were looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen directed at her in a very long time. Full attention, no discomfort, no carefully arranged blankness. He just looked at her like she was a person who mattered and said, "Hi, my name is Marcus. I was sitting over there and I noticed you're in pain, and I don't want to intrude, but I also don't feel right about pretending I didn't notice, so can I help?" Sarah stared at him. "You don't have to let me," he added. "I'll leave if you want, but I have a sister who's a labor and delivery nurse, and I've picked her up from enough late shifts that I know what contractions look like, and you've had two since I sat down." Sarah opened her mouth, closed it. She'd spent so long managing everything alone, making herself small, not burdening anyone, that the simple offer of help had temporarily short-circuited her ability to speak. "I don't have anyone to call," she finally said. It came out quieter than she intended, and more honest. "That's okay," Marcus said, without missing a beat. "You have me." He pulled out his phone and called his sister before Sarah could protest. She listened to half a conversation. "Yeah, Diane, I'm serious. I need you to talk to me," and watched his face while he listened, and saw him nod. "She says we need to time them properly and figure out how far apart they are. And if they are under 5 minutes, we need to get you to the hospital right now." He looked up. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Sarah. Okay. When did the last one start?" And just like that, there was a plan. Not a perfect plan, not the plan Sarah might have designed if she'd had options and time and someone in her corner for the past 8 months, but a real, breathing, present plan, offered by a stranger in a canvas jacket who had simply decided that noticing wasn't enough, and that he needed to do something about what he'd seen. The third contraction came 4 minutes after the second. Marcus was already standing. He picked up her backpack carefully, like it contained something precious, which it did, and offered her his arm. The young barista appeared again with her coat, which she'd retrieved from somewhere, and pressed it into Sarah's hands. "For outside," she said, "it's cold." Sarah didn't cry. She wanted to, but she was focused on breathing, on moving, on putting one foot in front of the other toward the door Marcus was holding open. The other customers watched, and their faces had changed now. The woman who'd looked away was standing, asking if she could help. A man near the counter had his phone out, already pulling up the route to the nearest hospital. People, Sarah thought. They just sometimes needed someone to go first. Marcus talked to her the whole way to his car, which was parked half a block down. Not to fill the silence or because he was nervous, but because Diane had told him to keep her focused, keep her breathing, keep her present. He talked about his sister, who had delivered more than 400 babies, and cried at approximately 40% of them. He talked about the coffee shop apparently he came in every Thursday, had never once sat near the window before, had only done so today because the corner table was taken. Lucky table, Sarah managed, between breaths. Lucky table, he agreed. The hospital was 11 minutes away. By the time they arrived, the contractions were 3 minutes apart. A nurse met them at the entrance with a wheelchair, and the admissions process blurred into motion and voices and bright lights, and somewhere in the middle of it, Sarah grabbed Marcus' arm. "You don't have to stay," she said. "You've done enough. You've done more than enough." Marcus looked at her steadily. "I know I don't have to," he said. He stayed. Diane arrived 40 minutes later, still in her scrubs from a shift that had ended 2 hours ago, and took charge with the quiet authority of someone who had done this 1,000 times. She held Sarah's hand. She talked her through it. She said, "You're doing so well," in a voice that managed to be both clinical and completely sincere. At 11:47 a.m. that night, Sarah's daughter was born. She was small and furious, and absolutely perfect, and when they placed her on Sarah's chest, she stopped crying immediately, like she recognized something, like she knew she'd arrived somewhere safe. Sarah looked at her daughter's face, this new, impossible face, and then looked up at Marcus, who was standing in the corner of the room because he hadn't known whether to stay or go, and had chosen to stay and be unobtrusive about it. "Thank you," Sarah said. It wasn't enough. It wasn't close to enough, but it was what she had. Marcus nodded. His eyes were bright in a way he clearly wasn't going to acknowledge. In the weeks that followed, things did not become simple. Simple was not a realistic destination, but they became possible, which was something Sarah had almost stopped believing in. Diane connected her with a housing assistance program she hadn't known existed. Marcus, who turned out to run a small contracting business, offered her a part-time administrative job that came with flexible hours and no questions about her resume gaps. The coffee shop barista, whose name was Priya, started a small fundraiser among the regulars that paid for 3 months of diapers and a second-hand crib. None of it was charity, exactly. It was more like a sudden, unexpected acknowledgement that she existed, that she was worth helping, that the distance between disaster and stability was sometimes just one person deciding to sit down across from a stranger and say, "I noticed. Can I help?" Sarah named her daughter Clara. It meant bright and clear, and she figured that was as good a thing as any to aim for. On Thursdays sometimes, when the weather was decent and Clara was in a good mood, Sarah would carry her into Maple Bean and sit near the window at the lucky table. She'd order a coffee she could now afford to pay for, and she'd look at her daughter's face, and she'd think about how close it had all come to going differently, how one man had looked up from his own life and chosen not to look away. It wasn't a miracle, it was just a decision. But sometimes, Sarah had come to understand, those two things were exactly the same.